Welcome to session 12C. We continue in the temperament blends. I am Charity Kirigo Kagwaini. It's always a great joy to come on this platform to add value to you, because when I add value to you, then you become who you ought to become, and equally I get to become who I ought to become. And each one of us can go out and do, what we ought to do. And therefore, each one of us can have what we ought to have. We now shift focus to the introvert blends, where the introvert temperaments take the lead in the combinations. And before we get into this blend, allow me to quote from the great King Solomon. This is what he says: "Wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in a city." Now let's talk about the melancholic blends. The first of the melancholic blends is the melancholic sanguine blend. This person is a good scholar. This person is a great teacher, both high school and, institutions of higher learning. This is because the male part of them is able to get the little known facts. They're able to get the details. They're able to dig out the details and information that, the rest of the temperaments may not have the patience to dig out. And then the sanguine is able to communicate that information to the students. So they make very good scholars and teachers. This person is good in low pressure sales jobs. Why? Where you're selling products that need a little bit more detail to make a sale. For example, if you are selling high-end machines and you need the person selling, the person pitching is able to get the fine details and be able to communicate those details, with specification and with the detail that they deserve, so that you can earn, that sale. Then look for a person who has a combination of melancholic sanguine combination, because they're able to get the details, they're able to communicate the details with the strength of the sanguine. These people also make very good lawyers, and they work well in production control and where you need cost analysis, once again because of the strength of the male. And of course, when it comes to the lawyers, then the sanguine is able to, just communicate that information and be able to argue out their case and argue out their case right and with specifics. This person prefers to work for someone else. They will rarely venture into their own businesses or set up their own organizations. But if you are looking for somebody who can help you get there, you've set up a business, an organization, and you don't know how to, just get it started, look for a melancholic sanguine. This person is a very loyal spouse and is a very devoted parent, especially once they have overcome the weakness, the tendency for them to criticize and over-criticize people. Once they overcome that tendency and that weakness, then they become very, very, very devoted parents. This person has a tendency to have mood swings. When circumstances are pleasing, they will be happy. But when they are injured, they can very, very easily wallow in the sea of self-pity. So you have to be aware of that. The male can be gloomy, And the sanguine can also be gloomy when things are not good. So if you combine that, then they can have extreme mood swings. This person tends to be rigid, the male who cannot, be easily convinced of things. They can also be impractical, the male who is, a perfectionist. And they can be idealistic, the sanguine who just has this idea, they're just full of ideas, but they never get the job done. And therefore, sometimes it takes, for things to be done, it takes a bit too long. And that's why we are saying they can be rigid. Because by the time you convince the male, and by the time, the sanguine gets it done after he has finished doing all the talking, then, sometimes they will want to do things, but practically speaking, it's never getting done. The other flip side of the melancholic sanguine is that they suffer fear and insecurity, and they often have a very poor self-image, and this limits their potential and their capabilities. The second of the male blends is the melancholic choleric blend. This is the moody male, but is neutralized by the self-will and the determination of the choleric. So when the male may want to be on the lower side of life and moody and gloomy, then the choleric will quickly neutralize that and will sort of jumpstart and give, determination to this person. So it balances out right. This person is a perfectionist, but is also a driver. Because you see, the perfectionist, it must be done right, but then the driver, it needs to be done. So while the male may want it to just get it very right, the choleric will push for it to be done. And therefore, again, you will get things done by this person. They thrive in professions that demand research and accuracy. And this is because they will put in twice as much work. The male, just has to keep going and keep going and keep going until it's done. The choleric who does not believe in failing, and it has to be done. So they will, bring out that in their professionalism. And therefore, when you need detail, but when you need accuracy, and when you need, twice the job done, this is that kind of person. This person possesses very strong leadership capabilities. They never come to meetings late. This is a person that has details, they have the facts, and they have the solution in one person. This person who is, melancholic, choleric, may venture into their own business and set up their own organizations. And when they do, these organizations are run with efficiency. This is a person who is very, very efficient. They will not make a lot of noise. There will not be any pomp and color about, who they are and what they do. But when you get close to them, you will discover efficiency is the driver here. This is a person that is extremely difficult to please, because the male is not somebody that, is easily, pleased. And, with the same breath, the choleric is not somebody that is easily pleased. And when you fall out with them and they are displeased with you, they will even withhold certain things from you just to confirm and to prove to you that they are displeased with you. When things go south, when things are not working right for this person, they can, bring themselves down with self-criticism. They can be very hostile to themselves, and they can bring themselves down with self-persecution. This is because the male believes in doing things, right and perfectly. And the choleric also believes in just, does not believe in failure. So when things are not working out, this person who has this blend will be very hard on themselves because they should not be failing. And in extreme cases, they will even be sadistic. This person finally, but of course not the least of the other things that we can look at, this person rarely lives up to their full potential because they have the internalized anger of the male, or they have a tendency to internalize anger, and they have a tendency to be vengeful. This comes from the choleric. The third of the melancholic blends is the melancholic phlegmatic blend. This is perhaps the strongest scholar the world has, and they bloom in an environment that is quiet, that is solitary, the kind that is conducive for people who like to do research, the kind that is conducive for people who like to study. They excel. This is a person that excels in academia, and math, tops their list. This is because they also combine the analytical, perfectionist melancholic and the organized, efficient phlegmatic. And therefore, they are detail conscious and they are accurate. This is the person that probably hosts the greatest of the talents and capabilities if they get somebody who can, call them out, if they get somebody who can help them harness those capabilities and that talent that, is hidden. You remember, this is an introverted person. So somebody has to sort of help dig out those capabilities. So if they get that person, for example, if they get a spouse, if they get a coach, if they get a mentor who can call them out, this is a wealthy person when it comes to giftings and capabilities. This is a good-natured person. Remember, the melancholic is not somebody who will push their way into your own space. The phlegmatic is a person who is sort of laid back. So this is a, good-natured person. They can easily become discouraged again when things are not working, and they can develop negative thinking. Remember, the male is somebody who sort of second guesses themselves. The phlegmatic is a person who is not very motivated, and they can just withdraw and throw their hands, throw in the towel. So they can, get into that place of negative thinking when things are not working or when they feel discouraged. This is a person who can be vulnerable to fear, anxiety, and negative, self-image and negative self-worth. And like I have mentioned, they can easily give up when things are not, going. And therefore, they need somebody who can cheer them on and just encourage them and help them see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is a person who is very uncooperative with the rigidity of the male and the non-responsive, distant phlegmatic. The phlegmatic is somebody who is laid back. They don't want to get too involved. And so when you need, people to just come in and pull in, this is the one who will probably be the most uncooperative of the blends. Well, what is your blend? Are you a combination of the sanguine blends? Are you a combination of the choleric blends? Or are you a combination of the melancholic blend? We still have one more blend, and that is what we shall look at in session 12D. Now you know.